friends, and welcome back to the Rebel Show. Things are going well here in Colorado. We're continuing today to talk about guns, and I think it's an important topic because there's a lot of talk about it in politics anymore, and there's a lot of candidates running for president. Well, a lot less candidates now since Elizabeth Warren has decided to call it quits. But still, there's a lot of people out that want this, and it always makes you question, why are people so concerned about this? They call it gun safety, and they want children to be safe, and they don't want schools shut up, but then they have gun-free zones. So instead of protecting children, they open them up to be in positions where it's a problem. So their solution is the government wants to remove weapons from people. They call them weapons of war. And it makes you go, well, they're weapons of peace? Maybe like a spoon or something? No, but there are weapons of peace, and it's called guns. It's called protection, peace through strength and deterrence. That's what we really need to be focused on. We need to keep our self-preservation devices. Back in the Bible, they had swords and stones and different things. Nowadays, we have guns. If someone attacks you on the street or invades your home, you literally are going to war with them. A war is a struggle or competition between opposing forces for a particular end. Another definition is a state of competition, conflict, or hostility between different people or groups. So a fist fight in the schoolyard is a war. War between two countries is war. And attempted robbery is war. And sometimes there's even war with vehicles where people run people over. So there's no such things as weapons of war. Pretty much let's word it like this. All weapons are weapons of war. That's what they're designed to do, is defend, and some people use it to try to hurt others. It should be for defense. Some definitions deal with foes being armed. War can be with any object with any intent to do harm or kill another person. So fists, feet, knives, rocks, guns, etc. are all weapons of war. That's war. So war is a conflict between foes, so all weapons are weapons of war. It's good to realize this because the left uses this term to try to make the weapons look like, oh, these are military weapons and civilians shouldn't have them. Well, why not? The government has them, and so if they ever try to take over, why wouldn't we want to have something similar to them? Even though what they call an assault rifle isn't really a military weapon. It's just a rifle that's built to look like a military rifle. It's not the same thing. It's similar to a kit for a car to make it look like a different car. So that's kind of similar to what we're talking about here. Law-abiding citizens should have the same weapons the military has. Should we have tanks? Why not? Why shouldn't we have tanks? If the government's going to try to come after us with tanks, wouldn't it be nice to have a tank? Now, I'm not saying this is going to happen. I'm just saying when the founders included being armed, it was for the intent of being able to protect yourself against a government that wanted to take over and force you to do something you didn't want to do. Because the government's supposed to work for the people. It's not the leader of the people. It's the servant of the people. Remember in the Bible when Peter cut off the ear of the guard when they came to arrest Jesus. The Bible doesn't talk a lot about people carrying swords all the time. So we know the guards did and soldiers, the Roman soldiers, but Peter was just a disciple of Jesus, a fisherman, and he had a sword with him just in the garden. Now, maybe he armed himself for that night, but still, he was planning on something happening and being armed. That's important. When you live in a place where there's potential for there to be crime or you never know what's going to happen, it's good to be able to protect yourself at all times. Every gun confiscation comes with mass murder. That's one thing that's important to know. It starts with just gun confiscation for the public safety, and it never ends there, though. Anytime a nation allows itself to be disarmed, the same thing always happens. In Turkey in 1911, 1.5 million were murdered. In Russia in 1929, 20 million were murdered. That's crazy. 20 million people that can't defend themselves murdered because a dictator decides to do whatever he wants because he has the guns and we don't. That's terrible. That's not the intent. China in 1935 had 20 million. I mean, add these numbers up when we're done. Germany in 1938, 16 million Jews. Cambodia in 1956 had 100,000 murdered. Uganda in 1970 had 300,000 murdered. And Venezuela lately has been disarmed. And you know what's going on down there. I've seen videos of the military using their military vehicles and running over people. You know, I've heard that the people have started eating the zoo animals. They're starving. I've heard they've lost an average of 18 pounds. All this stuff. They call it the Maduro diet. We've talked about that before. But here's what happens. When people's ability to protect themselves is taken from them, dictators can do anything they want, and they do anything they want. It never turns out good. There's no scenario ever where it turns out good. So we need to make sure that we pay attention to what's going on and vote for people that will not disarm us. You know, dictators with plans to disarm the citizens. You know, they have a plan to do something. They want to purify the population or something like that. Dictators will disarm then murder the citizens they don't like Jews and Christians, etc. They could be like, I don't like blonde people, so all blonde people, we need to annihilate them. Why? Because they're a dictator. They're evil. They've got evil hearts. A dictator is a person exercising absolute power, especially a ruler who has absolute unrestricted control in a government without hereditary succession. Think about unrestricted control. That's the words that jumped out to me on this. You got to have restrictions. You know, people who value life and freedom want their neighbors armed. You want to know that if you're in trouble, your neighbor's going to come to your aid. And we're getting away from the community side of things in the United States. We all have neighbors. I admit I do. I don't even see them half the time. This is why America has separated powers, so that there's not unrestricted control. There's 3 branches of government, and you put them all 3 together, and you get a dictator. You get unrestricted control. That's why the founders separated this. If someone is elected that is a Marxist, socialist, as president, and wants to push executive orders in place and says, we cannot wait for Congress, we will have a layer of protection. It's called the Supreme Court. And one of those candidates is out there. They can't wait for Congress. We just have to push this through. That's not the way it's supposed to be. First of all, do the people want that? Do they care what the people want? They know best. What makes them so smart? And we've got the Supreme Court right now and other lower courts that can hinder a person like that. But we can't let a person like that get elected. You know, a president, dictator cannot just push through his will into this country. Laws need to pass through filters or handcuffs of the Constitution is how it should be. And that's what Supreme Court's supposed to do, is filter laws through the Constitution. They don't always do that. They go through opinion and what has happened in the past. You know, to me, it's an amazing thought to follow the Constitution. Recently, I have reread the Constitution twice. And I recommend everybody, it's not a hard read. It takes maybe 15 minutes. Just read it. See what it says. Because if you know your rights, if you know what we're supposed to have, you should be frustrated when you see it not happening. So I recommend it. It's easy to find. You can find it online easily or buy it. It's worth having it in your library. The reason there's a Second Amendment is not for hunting or for muskets. It's for radical government who wants to take over your rights. That's really the reason we're armed, is to keep what happened to the colonists back in the day from happening to us. They got forced into situations they didn't want to have. Soldiers were killing people. It was terrible. We've talked about some of these things in the past, but that's the reason we're armed, is to make sure we have our own safety net. It guarantees our ability to defend ourselves. And what do you do if you hate guns? I've known people that said they hate guns. So they hate the formation of metal and plastic in a certain shape. Like, I know that there's some kids that have been suspended for eating food into the shape of a gun. Or maybe you just don't own one. How about that? That's a good way. If you hate guns, don't own one. Or get trained and see that they're not scary, which is what I would recommend. I know someone that hated guns. We took them shooting, and they said, oh, no big deal. And now they don't have a problem, you know? People who have never gone through a background check want to push for stronger background checks. Think about this. People who have never done it, they've never gone through it themselves, want to try to enforce something that's already pretty good. And I've been through background checks before in my life, and it's not as easy as people think. You know, Biden is wrong. He said 150 million Americans have been killed since 2007 with guns. So half the country is what Joe Biden says. You know, guns in America is a good thing. Again, they provide self-protection and they keep the government in check. That's the biggest thing we're facing right now. The government always needs to be in check in all areas. If we let them go crazy, they will take everything. That's how it works. That's how tyranny works. That's why government shouldn't have people that are in it for like 30 and 40 years, is because they get corrupt. It's those that trust the government that we should worry about. Never trust the government. That's important. Never trust these people. That's why we have them. That's why we have elections so all the time. We always have elections. And it's because to get the weeds out. It's to weed. And so much lately, we have not pulled out the bad weeds. We have let corrupt people get reelected and reelected and reelected, and now you see where we're at. So real gun research shows that more guns, less crime. It's just the truth. Because not knowing if someone is armed or not is a deterrent to robbing, raping, and murdering them. That's the bottom line. You don't know who's packing, so you're probably not going to attack. If you know a community is armed, if you drive into a community and it says, "We're well armed, beware, don't commit crimes here," you're turning around. And that's the point. So let's be sure that we don't let this war on guns continue. And let's stand up for what God gave us and government is supposed to protect. Government didn't give it to us. God did. Thank you very much.